Breaking news! A storm is brewing inside the walls of the Ravens organization, one that could completely reshape the future of this franchise. The kind of shift that doesn't just change the playbook, it changes the legacy. The whispers have grown louder. The tension? Unmistakable. And the question everyone's afraid to ask might now be the one that defines everything. Is John Harbaugh really on the verge of walking away from Baltimore? But before we get into the truth behind the headlines, make sure you hit that like button if you're a true Ravens fan. It's always amazing to see fans of all ages supporting this team. And if you feel like it, comment, "Go Ravens," right now, because what you're about to hear could spark the most intense debate we've had all season. Let's get right to it. Ravens insider Adam Schur dropped a bombshell this week that has sparked fierce debate across Baltimore and beyond. According to Schur, there's real speculation, real possibility, that John Harbaugh could step down or mutually part ways with the Ravens by 2026. It's not just wild rumor, it's becoming part of the narrative as whispers have grown louder throughout the season, especially after what many have labeled a deeply disappointing campaign. The Ravens, who once again entered the season with championship-level expectations, stumbled to a 1-5 start. And even though things stabilized toward the end, it's hard to ignore the lingering feeling that something's missing. That spark, that edge, something that once defined the Ravens under Harbaugh, is fading. The chatter has only grown louder leading into the game against Pittsburgh. Some fans on social media are even calling it a loser-gets-fired game between Harbaugh and Steelers coach Mike Tomlin. While that's clearly speculative, there's undeniable tension in the air, and it raises a very real question. Has Harbaugh lost the locker room? There's no internal drama being reported directly, but the tone and atmosphere surrounding the team hint at something deeper. Harbaugh, now 63, has been a fixture in Baltimore for nearly 2 decades. He's earned tremendous respect from owner Steve Bisciotti and GM Eric DeCosta. But in today's NFL, even the most iconic relationships come to an end. And this one, if it does end, seems headed toward a quiet, respectful mutual separation rather than a messy firing. Still, as fans, we can't ignore the hard truths. If the Ravens fall short of playoff success again this year, it would mean just 3 postseason wins in the last 8 seasons. That kind of performance simply doesn't meet the standard in Baltimore. Not for this franchise. Not with Lamar Jackson under center. Not when the window feels wide open. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, this might be where things get truly complicated. Because if it comes down to keeping Lamar or Harbaugh, the choice should be obvious. You don't sacrifice an MVP-caliber quarterback for a coach whose playoff success is fading into distant memory. Choosing Harbaugh over Lamar would be catastrophic. It'd be a decision fans, and maybe even the organization, couldn't live down. Let's not forget what this franchise looked like between the Super Bowl win and Lamar's arrival. Those years were filled with mediocrity. Lamar changed everything. In fact, some argue he's the only reason Harbaugh still has a job. Harbaugh was asked recently about his future, and in classic Harbaugh fashion, he sidestepped the real answer. He gave the usual coach speak about taking it day to day and focusing on helping players and coaches. But let's be honest, it sounded like a man who knows the end could be near. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. If Harbaugh does step down, or if the Ravens decide to go in a new direction, who replaces him? Names are already swirling. Brian Flores is the top choice for many. His defensive mind, his no-nonsense intensity, and previous head coaching experience make him a compelling candidate. He embodies the play like a Raven mentality that many fans feel has been missing. Then there's Robert Saleh, who despite criticism, is still viewed as a leader who could reset the culture. Jesse Minter's name has been floated too, thanks to his ties to Jim Harbaugh and his defensive success at Michigan. Clint Kubiak, with his impressive offensive work in Seattle, is gaining momentum. And even big dream names like John Gruden or Dan Lanning have entered the conversation, though most of those feel like long shots. The dream of all dreams? Mike McDonald. Letting him walk only to watch him possibly lead another team to a Super Bowl? That still stings. If there were a way to bring him back, Ravens fans would be ecstatic. Because let's face it, keeping John Harbaugh without substantial postseason results would mean doubling down on familiarity rather than performance. It would mean prioritizing loyalty over competitiveness. And in today's NFL, where windows for Super Bowl contention can close in an instant, that kind of thinking can be fatal. There's a very real, very difficult decision looming. Do you trust that Harbaugh can reinvent himself and this team one more time? Or do you accept that 17 years is a long time, that sometimes even the most legendary voices go stale, and that it's time for new leadership to take this talented roster to the next level? The Ravens front office, as we know, operates with patience and long-term thinking. That's why Harbaugh has lasted this long. That's why there hasn't been a knee-jerk reaction despite years of postseason underachievement. But this year feels different. The team doesn't just need a fresh coat of paint. They might need a full rebuild of philosophy and structure. And when you look at the pieces already in place, Lamar Jackson still in his prime, a defense full of potential, and young stars like Zay Flowers blossoming, this is not the time to tread water. It's the time to strike. It's the time to align leadership with ambition. Even Harbaugh himself may be sensing that. At 63, having achieved nearly everything there is to achieve with one team, maybe the idea of stepping away isn't about failure, it's about finishing his Ravens chapter with dignity. Perhaps he sees the writing on the wall, or maybe he just wants to go out before he's pushed out. The idea of walking away after a valiant but ultimately disappointing season might feel more palatable than waiting until the entire city demands change. And think about this, if the Ravens do make a run, maybe not all the way to the Super Bowl, but at least a deep push, doesn't that give Harbaugh the perfect chance to say goodbye on his own terms? Ride off not in disgrace, but in recognition of everything he's built? It's not about forgetting the legacy. No one in Baltimore will ever forget what Harbaugh brought to this franchise. A Super Bowl title, consistent competitiveness, a culture that, for a long time, defined toughness and discipline. But legacies don't always last forever. And sometimes the most powerful move a coach can make is knowing when to walk away. Because if he doesn't, and if things keep trending downward, the conversation will turn uglier. The respect might start to erode. The whispers become shouts. And instead of a graceful exit, Harbaugh could find himself facing a forced one. Let's dive even deeper, because this decision, whether to keep or move on from John Harbaugh, doesn't just affect the head coach. It creates a ripple effect that could impact the entire identity of the Baltimore Ravens for years to come. If the Ravens do decide to part ways with Harbaugh, you're not just changing a coach, you're reshaping the entire culture. Harbaugh has been the face of this franchise for so long that any new leader would need to not only bring strategic upgrades but also rebuild the emotional and philosophical framework of this team. That's not a light task, and it's part of what makes this such a risky, yet potentially rewarding move. The next head coach has to be someone who can command the respect of the locker room immediately, someone who can work in harmony with Lamar Jackson, and someone who understands the city of Baltimore. This fan base demands effort, toughness, and integrity. A flashy name alone won't be enough. That's why names like Brian Flores and Jesse Minter have gained traction, because they fit the Ravens mold. They represent a return to grit and identity, something that many feel has eroded in recent seasons. But let's not sugarcoat it. This team's trajectory is closely tied to Lamar Jackson. The relationship between quarterback and head coach is one of the most crucial dynamics in all of football. And lately, it feels like there's been distance. You've got a quarterback playing at an MVP level, yet surrounded by narratives about coaching uncertainty and underperformance when it matters most. If a coaching change helps Lamar thrive and brings the franchise back into serious Super Bowl contention, isn't it a risk worth taking? At some point, the Ravens have to look at the results and ask, are we wasting the prime of our generational talent by sticking with familiarity over innovation? All of this makes 2026 a fork in the road. Either the Ravens recommit to Harbaugh and hope he can defy the odds and restore the fire, or they take a bold step toward the future and embrace a new era, one that might finally unlock everything this team has the potential to become. Because let's face it, keeping John Harbaugh without substantial postseason results would mean doubling down on familiarity rather than performance. It would mean prioritizing loyalty over competitiveness. And in today's NFL, where windows for Super Bowl contention can close in an instant, that kind of thinking can be fatal. There's a very real, very difficult decision looming. Do you trust that Harbaugh can reinvent himself and this team one more time? Or do you accept that 17 years is a long time, that sometimes even the most legendary voices go stale, and that it's time for new leadership to take this talented roster to the next level? The Ravens front office, as we know, operates with patience and long-term thinking. That's why Harbaugh has lasted this long. That's why there hasn't been a knee-jerk reaction despite years of postseason underachievement. But this year feels different. The team doesn't just need a fresh coat of paint.